Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan's National Security Advisor has expressed concern over the worsening situation in Afghanistan, terming it extremely bad. Briefing lawmakers, Mueed Yusuf warned of Tehreek-e-Taliban's attacks, who he said could enter Pakistan under the guise of refugees. He said the Taliban are not present in Pakistan as of now, terming the reports Indian propaganda. Yusuf added that regional stability hinges on peace in Afghanistan, where violence has spiked in recent days amid the withdrawal of foreign troops. A UN human rights investigator says Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank amount to a war crime. Addressing a session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, he called on countries to act on illegal Israeli moves. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have shot wounded 80 Palestinians and detained several others in the occupied territory. In Bangladesh, at least 52 people have died after a massive fire raged through a factory in Nariyanganj, east of Dhaka. Authorities say 50 others are injured and many people are fear trapped, so the death toll may rise. In Pakistan, authorities have warned that there are clear signs of a fourth coronavirus wave starting in the country. Poor compliance with the SOPs and the spread of the Delta variant, first identified in India, have been blamed for the looming fourth wave. Several countries are also reimposing restrictions over rise in infections due to the Delta variant. Globally, there are now more than 4 million deaths and over 185 million infections. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Pakistan's National Security Advisor has expressed concern over the worsening situation in Afghanistan, terming it extremely bad. Briefing lawmakers, Mueed Yusuf warned of Tehreek-e-Taliban's attacks, who he said could enter Pakistan under the guise of refugees. The National Security Advisor told the lawmakers that the Taliban are not present in Afghanistan as of now, terming the reports Indian propaganda. He said regional stability hinges on peace in Afghanistan, where violence has spiked in recent days as foreign troops withdraw. He reiterated that the Afghan government needs to work on improving ties with Pakistan if it wants peace there. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi also briefed lawmakers, saying Pakistan intends to suggest power sharing in Afghanistan to avoid a civil war. He said holding Pakistan responsible for the worsening situation in Afghanistan is not fair. Moving on, the Taliban say they are free to attack administrative centers in Afghanistan as they made no promise to the US to leave them alone. At a news conference in Moscow, Taliban representatives said they are discussing a possible ceasefire with Kabul.
In comments carried by Russian media, the fighters said they will halt their offensive if the Doha talks are successful. The group said it controls over 85% of Afghan territory, but guaranteed that Afghanistan will never be used against other countries. Taliban spokesperson Shahabuddin Dilawar said the captured border crossings are functioning as normal. Meanwhile, Moscow noted that the Taliban currently control more than two-thirds of the Afghan-Tajikistan border. Whereas the World Health Organization says at least 56 civilians have been killed in Afghanistan in the last week alone.
And for more on this, we are joined by Mr. James Dorsey, a political analyst, joining us from Singapore. Mr. Dorsey, thank you for your time at Indus News. So after the spike in violence on the part of the Taliban in Afghanistan and the quick withdrawal of the foreign troops from there, how vulnerable are the neighboring countries, including Pakistan and Uzbekistan, due to this worsening security situation over there?
Look, I think that the Afghanistan's neighbors including the Central Asian states, but also including China, are nervous because they're not quite clear what's going to happen in Afghanistan. One thing is the Taliban takeover, which has its own problems, but also the threat of continued violence between various militant groups and resistance to militant groups in Afghanistan. And so what you've seen over the last couple of weeks, months maybe, is that the Taliban, aware that they are making progress and convinced that ultimately the government in Kabul will fall, are trying to reassure their neighbors, particularly first and foremost the Chinese, because of past links between Afghanistan and Uyghur militants.
Okay, Mr. Dorsey, President Joe Biden said that the U.S. achieved its objectives, including eliminating al-Qaeda's threat from Afghanistan. But a recent UN report claims otherwise. Could you shed a little bit of light on this? What are the reasons for this disagreement?
Well, I think the cup is half full or half empty. What is clear is that the Americans are leaving Afghanistan in limbo. It's not clear what the political regime will be and what that political regime will do. Having said that, fact of the matter is that Taliban was never really happy with al-Qaeda, certainly post-2001 in Afghanistan. And the Taliban increasingly have been at odds and have fought al-Qaeda. Plus that they have promised, and I think one should take that promise serious, that they are not going to be hosting jihadist groups in Afghanistan, that they would either be part of the government or be the government.
Mr. Dorsey, considering the pace and the magnitude of Taliban victories of key areas, do you agree with President Joe Biden that the Afghan forces are capable of defeating the Taliban?
Well, I think that they still have to prove that. If you look at recent Taliban advances, I think that calls the capability of the Afghan forces into question. Now, keep in mind that with the exception of Kunduz, most of those advances have been in rural areas, not in highly populated urban areas. So we will have to see how that, once the Taliban try to take major urban cities, how that's going to evolve.
Mr. James Dorsey, thank you very much for your time at Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now, moving on, Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This pushes the death toll in the Sundarbani area of Rajouri district to 2. The occupying troops have now killed 6 civilians in the past 24 hours. They also carried out operations in the Pulwama and Kulgam districts. The authorities have also suspended internet services in these areas. Rights groups say at least 400 Kashmiris have been killed by the Indian military since August 2019. In Bangladesh, at least 52 people have died after a massive fire raced through a factory in Narayanganj, east of Dhaka. Authorities say 50 others are injured and many people are feared trapped, so the death toll may rise. Officials say an investigation has been launched into the cause of the inferno. A fire department official said highly flammable chemicals and plastics had been stockpiled inside. Emergency services are still battling to put out the fire on the 5th and the 6th floors after 24 hours. A UN human rights investigator says Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank amount to war crimes. Addressing a session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, he called on countries to act on illegal Israeli moves. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have wounded 80 Palestinians and detained several others in the occupied territories. The Palestinian Red Crescent said Israeli forces fired rubber bullets at protesters in Qusra and Baita towns. They were demanding the Israeli military return the corpse of a Palestinian back to his family. In Haiti, police say a hit squad composed of Colombians and Haitian Americans assassinated President Jovenel Moise. Police Chief Leon Charles says 17 attackers, including 2 Americans, have been captured. In a briefing, he said 3 assailants were killed and 8 are still on the run. Colombia's government says at least 6 members of the alleged squad appear to be retired members of its military. Colombian Defense Minister Diego Molano also pledged to assist Haiti in its investigation effort. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department said it could not confirm if any of its citizens had been detained. In a press briefing, spokesperson Ned Price said Washington is responding to a request from Port-au-Prince for investigative assistance. Brazil's COVID-19 death toll has exceeded 530,000 with more than 1,600 fatalities overnight. South Korea is raising restrictions to the highest level after new daily cases hit a record for the second day. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4 million lives and has infected over 185 million others. More in this report.
Surging cases of the highly infectious Indian Delta variant and the return of restrictions are threatening the revival of pandemic-hit global economy. Canada has decided to continue restricting unvaccinated foreign tourists from entering the country, while New Zealand has delayed flights from Australia's New South Wales region after the outbreak in Sydney worsened. Australian authorities have also warned that a 3-week lockdown may be extended as the city reported its biggest rise in cases for the year.
New South Wales is facing the biggest challenge we have faced since the pandemic started. And I don't say that lightly. And unless there is a dramatic change, unless there's a dramatic turnaround in the numbers, I can't see how we'd be in a position to ease restrictions by next Friday. And that is why all of us need to work together.
Cuba has claimed its two-shot Soberana 2 vaccine has proven 91.2% effective in late-stage clinical trials. Meanwhile, Pfizer says it plans to ask U.S. regulators to authorize a booster dose of its vaccine over the spread of the Indian Delta variant. But the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention say the fully vaccinated Americans do not need a booster shot at this time. They, however, have warned that the daily COVID-19 cases in America have increased 11% from last week.
We are starting to see some new and concerning trends. Simply put, in areas of low vaccination coverage, cases and hospitalizations are up. Further, we are seeing some small clusters and larger outbreaks of COVID-19 in locations such as camps and community events where proper, hard-learned prevention strategies are not enforced and the virus is readily able to thrive.
The Global Vaccine Distribution Scheme, COVAX, says it aims to deliver 520 million doses to Africa this year. In Russia, Moscow's mayor said the situation is gradually stabilizing in Russia after a surge driven by the Indian strain, but the new daily cases remain high nationwide. Qatar, meanwhile, has announced to resume issuing visas to foreigners in line with the new travel and return policies.
In Pakistan, authorities have warned that increasing Delta variant cases may lead to a fourth coronavirus wave. The National Command and Operations Center has banned air travel of unvaccinated people from next month. It also declared it mandatory for all adult students and workers to get themselves vaccinated by 31st of August. Over 19 million vaccine doses have already been administered in the country so far. Meanwhile, the Health Ministry has reported 25 deaths and over 1,700 infections overnight. The caseload has crossed 969,000, with more than 911,000 people recovered. The ministry said there are over 35,000 active cases, of which more than 1,900 are critical. Pakistan is marking the 54th death anniversary of the mother of the nation, Fatima Jinnah. She was the younger sister of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. More in this report.
A dentist by profession, Jinnah joined the struggle for a separate Muslim homeland. She was one of the leading founders of the freedom movement. Jinnah played an active role in making the dream of Pakistan a reality. In a statement, Pakistan's foreign ministry paid tribute for her passionate support of civil rights, while Human Rights Minister Shireen Mazari called her an icon and a role model for women. The Lady of Pakistan died in 1967 due to a heart attack and was buried beside her brother in Karachi.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Nigeria, 6 students and 2 officials who were kidnapped last month from a school in Kaduna State have been released. A school official said they were released at an undisclosed location. Meanwhile, parents said they paid ransom for their children's release. Earlier, gunmen attacked an educational institution in Kaduna on June the 10th and kidnapped students and staff members. Abductions by armed men have become rampant in northern Nigeria, disrupting the education of hundreds of thousands of children. In this year alone, at least 10 institutions have been attacked by kidnappers, with around 1,000 students and staff members abducted. Former South African President Jacob Zuma has lost a bid to overturn his arrest for contempt of court. The High Court ruled that Zuma's concerns about his health are unfounded. Zuma was handed a 15-month jail term last week after he failed to attend a corruption inquiry. The ex-president claims that he is a victim of a giant political conspiracy. At least 10 people have died after a windstorm leveled scores of houses in Gambia's western districts. The National Disaster Management Authority said more than 1,500 people have been displaced. Entire families wandered around the outskirts of the capital Banjul in search of shelter. The heavy winds, rain and flooding also damaged utility infrastructure. Many of the African nation's coastal urban areas remain without electricity or running water in the aftermath of this storm. The UN Security Council has backed African Union mediation efforts between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan. It urged the parties to resume talks in a dispute over the operation of a giant hydropower dam on the Blue Nile. In an open session, the US called for urgently resuming talks under the leadership of the African Union. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield asserted that the bloc is the most appropriate venue to address this dispute. Egypt and Sudan have both called on the Security Council to help resolve the dispute. But Addis Ababa is opposed to any Security Council involvement and wants the AU to lead instead. The streets of New York City are flooded after the tropical storm Elsa hit the East Coast. Heavy rainfall and thunderstorms left roads and subway stations inundated by water. The National Hurricane Center says Elsa is expected to weaken to a post-tropical cyclone by Friday night. The Weather Service has forecast possible tornadoes in the eastern Carolinas and southeastern Virginia. Tropical storm warnings are in effect in parts of the East Coast as far north as Massachusetts. A UN rapporteur has called for open dialogue between Belgium government and migrants on hunger strike. Hundreds of migrants are on hunger strike for 7 weeks in an attempt to force authorities to give them the right to work. UN rapporteur on extreme poverty and human rights Olivier de Schutter met with strikers in Brussels church. Schutter hoped the government could provide migrants with a temporary right to work. He noted that authorities could establish a mechanism to allow permanent work to those who are integrated into the community. Migrants say the multiple applications for the right to remain in the country have been turned down. The Belgian government says it won't issue blanket permission to work outside current migration rules. Turkey says it is ready to extend its support and expertise on migration to Lithuania. The statement comes after Lithuania accused Belarus of flying in migrants from abroad to send to the European Union. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu addressed a news conference in Helsinki, Finland. Çavuşoğlu said he had discussed the issue with his Lithuanian counterpart, Gabrielius Landsbergis, in Vilnius. He noted it should be determined whether migrants were flying to Belarus on their own, as they cannot fly without valid passports. For his part, Landsbergis said a large number of the migrants had come from Turkey. Meanwhile, Lithuania says it has started building a barrier along its border with Belarus. Army's spokesperson said the first stretch will run 500 meters in length and measure 1.8 meters in height. More than 8 billion people could be at a risk of malaria and dengue fever by 2080. A new study predicts if greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise unabated, it could lengthen transmission season of both the diseases.
The study published in the Lancet Planetary Health Journal says up to 4.7 billion more people could be threatened by the world's two most prominent mosquito-borne diseases. Researchers predict if emission levels continue to rise at current rates, the effect on global temperatures could lengthen transmission seasons. It could prolong this season by more than a month for malaria and 4 months for dengue over the next 50 years. The research strongly suggests that reducing greenhouse gas emissions could prevent millions of people from contracting malaria or dengue. It says action to limit global temperature increases well below 2 centigrade must continue.
A new Oxfam report shows the number of people dying from hunger rose sixfold in the past year. At least 11 people die every minute from hunger and malnutrition. The global charity said overall 155 million people around the world are now living in crisis levels of food insecurity. It said wars, COVID-19 and climate change are fueling the world's hunger crises. China has released new photos of Mars' surface captured by its first rover, Zhurong. The rover has been working on the red planet for 54 Martian days and has traveled more than 300 meters as of Thursday. It has taken photos of rocks, sand dunes and stones on Mars with the help of self-equipped cameras. The China National Space Administration launched the probe Tianwen-1 from southern Henan province on the 23rd of July last year. The lander of the probe carrying the rover touched down in the southern part of Utopia Planitia, a vast plain of Mars, on the 15th of May this year. Zhurong drove down from its landing platform to the Martian surface on May the 22nd, starting its exploration of the red planet. This makes China the second country after the United States to land and operate a rover on Mars. Buckingham Palace has opened its garden to visitors, allowing the public to explore Queen Elizabeth's official residence for the first time.
In the heart of London, people will be able to walk through the 39-acre garden until September. Wardens will be on hand to provide talks, while arts and craft activities will be available for children. Guests will also have the rare opportunity to picnic on one of the lawns as part of their visit. The garden's landscape dates back to the 1820s when King George IV converted Buckingham House into a palace. There are more than 1,000 trees on the site and 320 different wildflowers and grasses.
In Croatia, a sculptor dedicates his time to tracing enormous geometrical sand artworks that last only while the tide is out. More about his disappearing art in this report.
Every year at the Zen Opazin Art Festival in Croatia, Nikola Faller draws patterns in the sands of the Neretva River Delta. He says the opportunities for creativity never end, as the next day a new surface is available to draw on when the waves recede. Faller says his inspiration comes from different traditions with sacred geometry.
I was drawing here when the tide receded. I have 3.5 hours at my disposal now that the tide is coming. I made circles. My inspiration comes from the traditions of sacred geometry around the world, the Christian, Buddhist, Hindu ones. There are plenty of ideas, but time is limited.
The artist plans to organize his own sand art festival on the Neretva River Delta, dedicated to temporary artwork.
Sandwriting is very easy to do. Anyone can do it. We plan to include children in the fall. We will launch a separate festival that will be based only on sand, the Sand Art Neretva. It will be in September at full moon.
Zen Opazin Festival Director Ivan Anchet said Faller delights attendees with his work every year. The art festival includes music, mural paintings and workshops for children, with artists participating from across Europe.
A trove of love letters that American poet Sylvia Plath wrote to her British husband, fellow poet Ted Hughes, is up for auction at Sotheby's.
Plath and Hughes married in 1956, and their relationship was as tumultuous as it was passionate. Her letters to Hughes explore her agony of separation from him, while she was studying at Cambridge. The sale comprises 55 lots and comes directly from the collection of Sylvia's daughter, Frida Hughes.
So we're very privileged to be offering a collection of material from Sylvia Plath, coming from her daughter, Frida Hughes, including the wonderful love letters written by her to her husband.
The sale also includes a deck of tarot cards given to Plath by Hughes for her birthday and a striking ink portrait drawn by Plath during the couple's honeymoon in Ben Durham.
We have published estimates for the various items, so the photograph album is estimated at £30,000 to £50,000, for example. But these are such unique items that it is very hard to predict how the bidding will go, and we think that there will be very strong interest. And
their wedding rings, family recipes and photo albums are also part of the auction. The items will be sold at Sotheby's in London from July 9 to 21.
While Haute Couture Week has seen the return of in-person shows as lockdown restrictions ease in France, some brands like Fendi have opted for digital presentations. More in this report.
Italian fashion house Fendi used soft colors and played with stone-like illusions for its haute couture collection. Designer Kim Jones said he looked to late Italian film director Pier Paolo Pasolini's depictions of Rome for inspiration. He presented the line digitally with a film by Italian director Luca Guadagnino. Models including Kate Moss and her daughter Lila Grace wore embroidered dresses, satin marble-like gowns, embellished jackets, and mosaic-like designs. The British designer stuck to a mainly neutral color palette, showing plenty of white, cream, and different shades of brown. Jones, also at the helm of men's wear at French fashion house Dior, is artistic director for women's wear and couture at Fendi, part of luxury conglomerate LVMH.
It's the time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Another business updates. The European Union says the UK is liable to pay $56.2 billion as part of the post-Brexit settlement. The EU's consolidated budget report for 2020 says the money is owed under a series of articles. The report read an initial amount of $8.04 billion is due for payment in 2021. With the remainder, the $56.2 billion amount is significantly higher than expected. The UK's Office for Budget Responsibility predicted that the bill would amount to $49 billion. The tension between the two sides has mounted over trade arrangements for Northern Ireland. US President Joe Biden has signed a new executive order to reduce monopolies and concentrated markets in major industries. In a statement, the White House said the order will remove barriers and promote competition throughout the US economy. The effort marks a major push by the Biden administration to focus on competition as part of the economic recovery from the pandemic. The order will mainly target industries including agriculture, airlines, health, broadband, and banking. Amazon has closed 340 online stores operated by one of its largest Chinese retailers in the first half of this year. Shenzhen-listed parent Tisa Information Industry estimated the retailer's sales this year to be reduced by 40 to 60%. Tis said stores run by Shenzhen Yokishu Technology were shut down for allegedly violating Amazon's rules. It said the affected stores made up 30% of Yokishu's total retail presence on the platform. In its filing, the company said more than $20 million of Yokishu's funds have been frozen. The crackdown affected products with a tag made in China sold on Amazon. The US stocks have climbed as investors shift their focus to second quarter earnings, with big banks reporting next week. The Dow Jones traded over 1% higher, while the S&P 500 was also up nearly 1%. The Nasdaq Composite gained about 0.5%. Meanwhile, oil prices surged for the second day as US inventories declined. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.